And then I'm just going to say it again. Welcome, everyone. We love to see faces. So if you have an opportunity to put on your camera, that's great. If you can't, that's also completely fine. And we're joined with speakers from 3 different continents. So if you want to let us know where you're joining from in the chat, please do. And feel free to introduce yourself. Let's also connect with each other here before we start the conversation about transparency and trust. So I think we wait a couple of more minutes for a few people to join. You can also put all your questions, comments in the chat during our conversation. Rona is here too, cool, from Germany. And Sweden, Niklas, welcome. And Ljubica from Skopje, North Macedonia. I hope I pronounce your name right. Anna.
Yes, Ljubica.
Good. Anna and Nai from Semra also, cool. Okay, I think we are just going to start, and Lela is kicking us off with introducing our guests. So please go ahead, Lela.
Thank you, Sanne. Just a second. Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for joining. Welcome to Sembra Media's webinar on radical transparency. We do have an archive of our previous webinars also on Sembra Media's YouTube channel. I definitely recommend the last one on newsletters, on production of newsletters and sustainability of newsletters. This webinar today deals with radical transparency. So transparency as a principle in itself, but also as a way of rebuilding media. So I'm Lela, joined by my colleague Sanne. We are both working on Project Oasis, which is research into sustainability, innovation, and impact of digital native media. I'm sure you all know everything about Oasis until now. We have a stellar group of speakers today with us, James Breiner, Ricardo, Esteves, Ribeiro, and Julia Drangosch, and my very imperfect pronunciation of their names, sorry. They will unpack radical transparency for us and its relations to sustainability, community building, and also relation of transparency to trust. So we started thinking about this webinar about transparency approximately a month ago, if I remember correctly. So without knowing that there will be these huge shock waves coming in our way, I'm referring now to Meta's decision to end third-party fact-checking program, support for third-party fact-checking programs worldwide, and recent Trump's administration decision to halt foreign aid programs. So this is all very recent. I'm sure you are not only aware of all of this, but also thinking how to survive this and following years. So this will for sure have severe impact on our independent media ecosystem. So that's why I'm also grateful for joining this webinar today, because I imagine that everybody has more pressing worries on their minds. But we also hope that this webinar dealing with trust, transparency, community building can also somehow show us the way forward. I will now just briefly, I have a very short presentation, 3 slides only, don't worry, that serve just as an introduction for our speakers and their projects. So first we have James Breiner with us. He is our, how to say, dear colleague, serving on Sembra Media's board. He also contributed to Project Oasis narrative report. He is consultant, trainer, training journalist globally, working in English and Spanish. He has more than 3 decades of experience on editorial and business side of newspapers. His focus or specialty is entrepreneurial journalism, meaning new financial models for independent digital media. We invited him to this seminar not only because he is a colleague and friend, but also because he writes already for years, if not decades before it was popular, about trust and about transparency as a way of building, or in this situation, rebuilding trust. You can find his writing at Entrepreneurial Journalism website. Exact address is jamesbreiner.com, and he also has Substack newsletter. Our second guest, Julia Drangosch from Qué Digital from Argentina. She's a co-founder of Qué Digital. Qué Digital is a digital newspaper founded in 2014 in Mar del Plata. It's local media aiming to serve as a bridge between people and what happens in their streets. It's non-profit, independent, self-managed. They always emphasize that they are outside of, that they are independent of big economic interests and lobby groups. Important part of their sustainability is content agency La Redacción. Qué Digital is also first Argentinian media to obtain journalism trust initiative certification, so certificate that is managed by Reporters Without Borders. We also have Ricardo with us from Fumaça, Portugal. He's a co-founder of Fumaça. Fumaça is investigative audio podcast founded in 2016 in Lisbon. Sanne did a great interview with Ricardo, which is part of our Sembra Media's Sustainable Connection newsletter that goes out today. Fumaça is well known in Portuguese-speaking world for its serialized investigations that won many Portuguese journalism awards. They also run many community formats that extend the impact of journalism they produce. They run newsletters, they run Slack group with their members community, organize events, etc. Outside of Portuguese-speaking world, so internationally, they are probably most well known for their very radical financial transparency that Ricardo will tell us more about. They are 2,000 members strong, and they're aiming to be first fully membership-funded newsroom in Portugal. They are also well known for their fair wage policy, meaning that they pay their team members decent wage. I will end with this and give floor to Sanne, who will lead the conversation with our speakers.
Thank you, Lela. And yes, we're joined with really nice guests from 3 different continents, as I mentioned before. So I think we're also getting a very holistic and diverse view of the topic of transparency. Together with all the participants joining in this webinar, we'd love to hear from you too. So don't hesitate to put your comments and questions in the chat during our conversation. And I would also like to say, let's really have a conversation instead of just a Q&A. So I already told the speakers, please interrupt each other or add to each other's comments and contributions. And I actually dare to say that we're here with quite an optimistic bunch of people, which is maybe a little bit extraordinary in the times we live in. And maybe I'm not right, but I do think that the guests that we have all in some way of the other are putting action in their work. And I think action is always a good sign to stay kind of optimistic in these times. James, I actually want to start with you. Lela already introduced you as somebody who writes a lot about trust in media. It's often spoken about in a negative way. Could you take us through your writing so far, or briefly explain with us how your view on transparency, what it looks like?
Well, transparency is part of that, no doubt. Transparency, you're revealing to your users, your readers, everything you do. I really like the transparency policies of Tina Welt or Tina Kaiser of Die Welt. She's an investigative reporter for the German newspaper, or she was. I don't know if she still is. But she pointed out that one of the things you can do to develop trust with readers is to do something with how you got the story. Where did you go to get this story? Who were the people that you talked to get this story? What data sources did you consult to get the story? What other media were consulted? How long did it take? And that sort of thing. Because trustworthy information is, generally speaking, it's costly to produce. If you're doing investigative type journalism, it takes time and it takes money. And the time part is people. And mainstream media, big media, have been losing audience and losing advertisers for the last, 20 years, really. And they've been cutting the quality of their product, and people notice. So the fact that they're not investing in quality media and they're not sharing the information with the public is a problem. So the reason I'm optimistic is I see lots of small independent media who are putting the time into gathering quality information about things that people care about, the quality of their public services, like public transportation, like public health, like public schools. They go out and they get the information and then they share it with the public. That information is, generally speaking, not available from mainstream media, which are, when we think of mainstream media, we're thinking about big television networks and big print companies, because they're all doing the same stuff about all the same people and all the same events. Maybe I've spoken too long here, but what people want is they want unbiased information that they can trust. I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I think you touched already on an interesting part of transparency, which is the almost the behind the scenes of reporting. And I know that Ricardo with Fumaça also gives a lot of transparency about that editorial process. Can you say something about that, Ricardo?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for inviting and for this caring presentation. Yeah, we do. Maybe I'll start by explaining a little bit how we started having radical transparency, or as you actually put it very well, like radical transparency meaning transparency as a principle and not really as a kind of a technique or a method that is used. And we did start, so Fumaça started in 2016, and in 2018 we did kind of turn what was a kind of just a hobby into a professional project when we got our first grant from the Open Society Foundations. And when we were kind of thinking of that, like obviously, like we got 100K in that first moment in the first grant, $100K, so meaning 80 something thousand euros. And obviously 80 something thousand euros, if you have like full-time workers, etc., it doesn't really last a lot of time. I mean, it's more or less like, for us, it was more or less a year in the first projection we had. So we knew that a year passed, we needed to kind of find a way to keep going, right? I mean, we could get grants until the end of times, but that was also very unlikely to happen. And so, and this is where radical transparency comes from, because when we started what would be our sustainability model, we started drafting it as a resistance to the current sustainability models, or what mainstream media calls business models. I don't believe that journalism should be a business, so we don't call ourselves to having a business model, but rather a sustainability model. And when we thought that we knew we didn't want to go ahead with the current traditional models from mainstream media, which would be ad revenue, sponsored content, paywalls, all of that. And maybe we don't have enough time to kind of talk about why we didn't want that, but we decided we didn't want that. And so we started thinking what would be the alternative to this. And we landed into membership, basically trying to convince people to give recurrent donations. Until very recently, just monthly recurring donations. Now we also have annual recurring donations, while keeping all our journalism open to everyone, so without paywall. So I mean, you could listen to every single episode of Fumaça for free, like right now. Well, not exactly like right now at the same time, all of them, but you could listen to the whole archive without paying anything. But what we're saying is, like, if you have the possibility, give us a donation. So it would be really like the model itself is based on trust. It's like, we trust that if you have the money and the possibility, and if you like our work, you will give us money. But if you don't, I mean, it's also okay. Just listen to what we're doing. But when we were thinking about, like, how can we convince people to actually give us money and know that they're doing the right thing, one of the things, well, obviously, like, editorially, there's other stuff, but one of the things was, like, we need to tell them how we are spending the money. Like, if we are kind of running our organization with their money, maybe we should actually tell them how we exactly use it. And so it started financially, but then, as Sanne was talking about, we also do we started then using it as a principle, also, like, editorially. And this meant in, like, doing a lot of things that were very, very kind of different from the journalism that we were used to consume, that we were used to, like, read or listen to, etc. And it touches a little bit on what James was talking about. And it started being, first, I really don't agree with when James was talking about people wanting unbiased news, because I really don't feel like that's exactly what people are looking for. I think people are looking for nuanced, honest interpretations of reality, not unbiased, not objective, but really, like, just honest and transparent, really. And so for us, more than kind of thinking that we wanted to be impartial, objective, unbiased, we decided that we wanted to be transparent. And that meant that editorially, every time we are writing a series and publishing a series at Fumaça, we will tell the people what is we will make sure that it is inside the piece what is the idea or the preconceived ideas of the host of the story. What, like, if, for example, I'm doing a story about policing, like I'm doing now a story on policing of ghettoized neighborhoods, it would be impossible for me not to include in the story that I am abolitionist and anarchist. I don't believe in a world where police exists. I feel like we should create worlds without police. And so it wouldn't make sense for me to create a whole 15-hour story for people without, in 5 minutes of those 15 hours, telling them, hey, I believe we should create worlds where police doesn't exist. So it's part of that, but it's also part of what James was also kind of suggesting, of kind of including in the story how we did the story, what was the process, and that we also include, like, how many people we talked to, or how did we arrive into the conclusions, right? Like, for example, if we are looking for someone that we want to kind of find out, or we were looking to get an interview with with a political representative, we will kind of, in the story, in the audio story, input the journey until we actually get the interview. So we start here and then here and then here and then here. And I think it really helps on people kind of understanding that, I mean, in believing that the conclusion that we arrive to is actually honest and transparent and makes sense because they've been there through the process. But it also has other stuff. It's like it also kind of makes people want to know the end of the story, because if you're kind of letting them go throughout the journey, I mean, eventually, like if you're like, I started with this person and they said no, and then with this person and then they said no, and then with this person, you're like, I want to arrive at the person who accepts the interview, right? So it also kind of helps in terms of the storytelling aspect of it. So yeah, I hope I answered.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Ricardo. You captured a lot of the different ways in how transparency comes about in Fumaça. Let's ask Julia. Julia, your outlet, Qué Digital, also founded 10 years ago or so, I think. And you also let us know before the webinar that you actually spend a lot of attention to your about page, explaining your audience what you stand for. What does transparency mean for Qué Digital?
Yes, well, first, thank you all for having us. This is my first webinar in English, so be patient with me. For us, transparency is, we think it's like key to achieving our goals that has to do with committed journalism. In a way, it's a little bit harder to us because we are in a small town. This is now the capital of Argentina. This is a small city. So here, some of the challenge has to do with the way we make journalism. We do breaking news. So it's a little bit different from Ricardo's experience, because we have to write every day about what is going on. So our transparency is different in the way we share with our community, but we work a lot in our about page, and also we design some editorial policies, so we can be sure that people who read us know where we came from. We believe that we are not objective in the same way that Ricardo has said, because we have a point of view, we have our publishing line, and we are really transparent about that. And there are people who like it, and there are people who don't. But we're really sure that in some way, what we say is, what you see is what you get. We are a cooperative. This is a business that is run by his own journalism. So it's really transparent the way of manage our organization in the way of editorial decisions, but also in the financial way of sustain the project. So transparency for us is really important, and we also believe that it's important to document all of this in paper or in digital in this way, because we are a digital news media. So for us, there was like some type of implicit contract through the practice about the practices in journalism, but we decided a few years ago to write it down, and I think that it's a really important exercise for all news media, because sometimes you think that everything you had in your head it's clear, but when your organization starts to grow, it's important that every person know what is your significant, or what is the significance of good practices, the best practices in journalism. So a way for us to maintain that transparency is to be really honest with our audience about the way we finance our operations, but also the way we conceive journalism.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Julia, because what you're saying actually is, by putting it out there for your audience, you as a journalist working for the outlet yourself get a better understanding also of your values and the way you work, etc. If I understand it correctly. James, do you want to respond to any of what Ricardo or Julia was saying?
Sure. I think I like the idea that a small media outlet has a definite point of view and is taking a position and is advocating for a particular interpretation of the world. So I use the word unbiased. I would say honest. I think people honest and authentic. I think that's what people want. And part of people's perception of media that are honest and authentic is this transparency to say, when you tell them, this is what we're doing, this is how we do it. And I think another aspect of this, I think Ricardo mentioned that journalism isn't a business, it's a public service. I totally agree with that. It used to be a business, and it used to be a very profitable business. But in the last 20 years, because it hasn't been such a good business, they've abandoned a lot of their public service aspects as they've laid off journalists and so forth. So in a public service, you're going to ask people for contributions, and I love the model of memberships and contributions where readers or users or listeners or viewers who are getting the news and the information from these small independent media outlets are willing to give their money to guarantee that their community gets this kind of information that's very valuable and that helps them make important decisions in their lives.
Yeah. I also have a question from the chat specifically for you from Ruona. Outlets that are balancing the need for secrecy that competitiveness brings. How is that possible to combine with the requirements of radical transparency?
Well, if you're in a competition, I mean, this is another aspect. I mean, if you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, then I think you're making a mistake. I think if you're doing the same thing everybody else is doing, there's no reason for somebody to come to your news outlet. So what I would advise is be different, be unique, offer something that people can't get anywhere else and that's of value. So if I don't know what niche they're in, but find an aspect of the topic or the geography that is different and that they feel like they can deliver something of very high quality that's honest and fair and accurate. That would be my response.
And that's maybe a good link to Ricardo again, because Ljubica in the chat wants to know also, how do you build a community around financial support? Who is your community, to be precise? And that kind of connects also to the niche and the focus that you're choosing. How did that process go at Fumaça, Ricardo?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the community or the membership program actually started in 2018 to 19. I think maybe it's important to say also that none of the people who co-founded Fumaça were journalists before. So we also had no preconceived idea what the newsroom was. I never studied journalism. I never did journalism. The first interview I did in my life was the first episode of Fumaça. So, I mean, we had really no idea what we were building. And I mean, in a way, still we don't in a lot of ways. But when we were starting the membership program, I mean, in the beginning, it actually started from people wanting to give money and us not having a way of receiving money. So we created just a Patreon account, and that was it. And we had like a few dozens, and then maybe a few hundreds. But we actually started in 2019 to 20, really realizing that we wanted to have, to realizing this vision of creating the first professional newsroom in the country that was solely backed by the people, 100% through free donations. But when we kind of laid out this vision in the beginning, in that first year, we just had like a few dozens, maybe 100 people, something like this in the community. And to be honest, if you or if any person, funder, I don't know, would ask us, do you really believe that you're going to get to 100%? I would say yes, but I was lying. I admit it, because nobody ever arrived at anything similar to 100%, but also nobody ever kind of even tried in Portugal to have membership before. So it was just not, it was really a shot in the dark. But we still were like, yes, we want to do this. We want to do this. We want to do this. And since that moment, so since more or less 2018 until today, we've been basically saying the same sentence in every single episode, in every, I don't know, every time we talk about this, we always say we want to be the first professional newsroom that is solely backed by the people. And actually, if you do talk with people who are members of our community, they will know by heart this sentence because they've listened to this hundreds of times. And then the thing is, it started growing, like more and more and more and more people every week started. I have a dog that's really, I don't know, barking. We started getting more people, and we started getting more people, especially in a few kind of different things. We also started realizing that when people joined the community, so when they started a monthly recurring donation, if you would ask them, why do you like, if someone is part of a community and you ask them, why do you give money? And we actually do ask that every year. And I wanted to bring that report here. In the questionnaire that we did, that was a few months ago, end of last year, maybe like a month and a half ago, and we asked people, why do you give money to Fumaça? Why do you keep a recurring donation? And we give them like around 10 options, which is more or less the things that we kind of give to the people of the community. So early access to the series, like you can binge listen to the whole series when the first episode is launched. Otherwise, you need to wait every week for a new episode, or access to the Slack channel we have, or access to the events we have, well, other stuff. And then the other one is like, just because I want you to keep going, keep doing what you're doing. 88.4% of people say that. 88% of the people who responded, around 500 answers, say they are giving us money just because they want us to keep going, not because of all the rewards we give them, but just because they want us to keep going. And we started realizing that this was very important for people. It was not because they wanted anything back, but really just the thing that they wanted back is just us doing journalism. And we started to realize that when we would ask the question, why did you join today? Rather than why do you keep giving a donation, but why did you join today, the community, whenever someone created a new membership, we then started realizing that they needed a trigger. They needed something that would make them, in that day specifically, to create a new membership. And those things were actually the events. Those things were when, for example, something quite weird and maybe counter intuitive, but when we published every 3 months, we publish a radical transparency report. So basically we go through our finances and we basically say, hey, it's updated, go to our website, every single expense that we have, it's there. Like when we buy a notebook, we put it there. When like every single expense is there, like, and we update it every 3 months. When we publish that, we also have a surge of new members. I don't know exactly why, but it happens. Or, for example, when we're publishing a new series, and we only usually publish one piece a year. And we've been for 2 years without publishing anything until 3 months ago. So, and when we publish something, yes, we do grow like 20%, 30%, 40% in the community. And I don't know, like a few years later, so 2018 until now, a few years later, a few years after we started membership, we have around 2,000 people who pay for Fumaça to exist, which at the moment is more or less 50% of the budget being paid by people, by membership. The rest comes from grants, but half comes already from membership. So I don't know, it's a complex and difficult history, and it's obviously much easier to kind of look back and understand how we are here than kind of when there in 2018 kind of predict where we were going for. But yeah, I think right now, if you ask me, are you actually going to get fully sustainable by the people? I can say yes, and I'm pretty certain that we're going to get there. Maybe we need 2, 3, 4 more years, but I think we're going to get there.
You're working towards that. It's super interesting. Thanks for sharing. Julia, your business model or sustainability model is slightly different. You also have an editorial agency, which is, I think, then the more commercial branch of the company where you do services for others. Can you share a little bit more about that and how it influences your transparency policy?
Yes, well, we came from a different background. I was listening to Ricardo, and he said he had never been in a newsroom. Well, Qué Digital was born just a few years later. It was a really bad experience in a newspaper, in a traditional newspaper. So a few of the members, we were dismissed from there because it was a process of, we call it vaciamiento. I don't know which is the word in English. So it was another company bought the company, and we were all dismissed. So that was and we were really tired of the old practices regarding the way of make journalism. It was, you have to write this because we are in bad terms with the that politic, and it was all of that all the time. So when we decided to create Qué Digital, we were sure we didn't want to repeat that story. So for us, we had experience in journalism, but we didn't have any experience in business or business administration, finance, without anything. So we had to learn a lot in the past decade. First, we thought that advertising was the model because that was all we knew. But we learned the hard way that it wasn't for us, because we have a really strict line in terms of not commercializing the content. So it was really hard to find people who want to advertise with us, because in general the advertising want to make arrangements about the content, not about a banner or something that was the logical for us. So it was a really hard road for us, and we started to learn, to investigate, and to search different ways of maintain our organization. And for us, it was really important that the cooperative, the business, because we do call it business because we believe that it's our business. I am the owner, my partners are the owners, so it's really important for us to embrace that philosophy. So we needed to find a way that it was aligned with our values. So we started to apply for grants. We find some places where we can get some money that help us, but to maintain the operation, all the expenses, it was difficult. So we started to thought about diversifying our revenues. So a few years ago, I think it was 2023, we participated in a really important program for us. It was Amuna Digital, and I see some people here that I really care, that help us a lot, some people from Siempre Media. And it was really like a mind changer, because we developed our agency, La Redacción, in which we can work with other partners for the generation of content, audio, all videos, photograph, all of that is really distinctive of us. People in general really appreciate not only the way we see the world and the way we tell the world through the news article, but also the way we tell with the tools we can find, like photography, all the videos, and that is really important for us. So we started to work with another partners, and that was a really good idea. We discovered that it worked, and today we have a really diversified model, and that really worked for us because in that way we can maintain our independent in editorial independence, because we can put really clear boundaries with our partners. We can say no. We can say this is like the boundary, and if we depended if we were dependent of one revenue, it will be really difficult, because we were putting we could jeopardize like the operation. So for us, the diversification of our revenues was really important, and we believe that is key to achieving our goals and to sustain the project, because it's a way of really put those boundaries that I think that are really important.
Yeah. And you're actually very close in touch with the audience that you're reporting on. You literally describe that you're on the streets where they are, right? So you do a lot of on-the-ground reporting. Is that
Yes.
How transparent are you in your content process? Do you also share how you work on a story and how the story has been put together? I know you do breaking news, so that might be a little bit more challenging, but just wondering.
Yes.
About the editorial.
Yes, we have in the About Us page, we have like the policies, and there you can find like all the process that we make when we develop a news article. It's different when you make breaking news, because you cannot tell in every article how you make that article, because it would be redundant, it would be boring, and it wouldn't have any sense for us. So we decided to put it in a little in a place in the landing page, so you can find it and you can know how we develop every news. It's really difficult, I think, for a news media outlet or a small news media outlet in a city like Mar del Plata, because right now, for example, there is like a lot of limitations regarding doing journalism, because the government, the local government, is putting lots of I don't know, the word is trabas, like it's really hard to talk to some politicians. It's really hard to develop a journalism that is honest, because there are lots of economical and political interests here, and lots of media that are run by not journalism, it's just people who own a business, are like really limited in terms of what they can say and what they cannot say. So we are a few of the news media outlets here in Mar del Plata that really have the independence to say what is really going on and to really show some things that maybe others would like to show, but they can't, because there are a lot of economical and interest limitations.
Yeah, very clear. And maybe also a bridge towards, because this is kind of like a good news story in a sense that you're doing a great job with both your media outlets in bringing this transparency. And at the same time, there must be challenges also in being radically transparent. There's always challenges also in building a community and finding your niche, although we hear that often as ingredients for success. James, can you say something about that?
Well, one of the risks that you run, well, in Argentina, especially, because Sembra Media, of course, is headquartered in Argentina, and I'm familiar with some of the issues that they have. But one of the issues with radical transparency on your finances is that the government is watching. And if they don't like what you do, they can cause you a lot of trouble by coming in and doing an endless audit. And I'm curious if Ricardo or Julia have either of them have had this problem, because I know that's been an issue for El Diario.es in Spain and for Mediapart in France. The government, when they don't like what you do, they come in and with their auditors, and they try to make sure that you're paying all your taxes and all that. They make your life miserable. That's their way of censoring you. I mean, that's a form of censorship, because typically a small organization doesn't have the financial resources to hire the kind of professional defense that you might need. I'm interested in what their experience.
Let's hear from Ricardo then.
I don't think we have, I mean, that kind of tax audit, not yet. We did have an audit. I don't know how random it was, but we did have an audit on our office, on our newsroom. It was it was basically, an audit there that made us, and then we're still in the process of answering to them more than like 30, 40 changes we have to implement in the office so it's secure for us to work in. Like, for example, having, I don't know, like signs on the walls saying this is, I don't know, caution, electric damage can happen, whatever. Or, I don't know, in our storage room, removing stuff that is kind of a few centimeters away from the shelves, because then it's not under the legal, I don't know, framework of how you manage a storage. And I don't know, like a few of those stuff. I don't know how random it was, but it did happen to the two at more or less the same month, the two newsrooms that share the newsroom we work in, that share the physical space we work in. So I don't know. But in terms of like taxes and all of that, no, not really. And we do if we had an audit, we would be very prepared for that, because we do have everything in place, like we wouldn't have to like go check everything, because it's even for the public, the public could audit us in a way. Like we have every single expense to the cent online. So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Not very worried about that. More worried about like being put in court or being beaten by police. That's more the kind of stuff that we worry about at the moment.
Being bitten by police. Okay, that's another webinar. But Ricardo, do you have around the radical transparency policies, do you have challenges with your audience also? Is it in dealing with all the questions you get maybe, or do you get a lot of questions, or is it really more appreciative and a reason for them to support you even more?
Yeah, I can't say that we have a lot of questions, to be honest. I think also because we put so much out there, people don't really kind of get. I think there's this weird thing that maybe even before we started this, we didn't really think about, but it's like if you do put everything online, like we do, like for example, if you put all your expenses online, then it's like only like less than 1% of the people will actually go there and check it. But because it's online, they just trust that it's okay. Like you wouldn't put something online that's really, really outrageous, right? And so I don't think we get a lot of questions or people who are concerned about, and even like editorially, I think we've been for so many years talking about this, about like why we do this and how we've been kind of putting ourselves in the story in a sense that kind of contextualizes and gives more nuance to the story of like, this is coming from this perspective. I have these preconceived ideas about this topic. So kind of just now do your own conclusions. I feel like the people who have been following us kind of already expect that, and they're not afraid, I feel like the people who are more afraid with our radical transparency is funders rather than the members of the community, the audience, the state. It's like the funders, the people who give us money, I think it feels like they are more kind of, oh, I like that idea in theory, but then when it comes to practice, it's a bit more difficult. Like, for example, we did have problems with, like one of the kind of things we do, and it's on our statute for radical transparency that we have online. We also have a statute for that. We have editorial statute and then the statute for radical transparency. And one of the points is that we publish every single contract that we sign. Every time the newsroom signs a contract, we publish online. There was a funder who didn't like that, didn't want their contract to be online. And we're like, yeah, we've been doing this for years. Why do you specifically not want this? It's just because we don't want it. And so we had to turn down the money because it was 300K. It was basically like we had no money in the bank, got offered 300K and had to say no. And we sent them the longest email of our life saying, hey, we're going to say no because this is part of our principles, and we shouldn't change our principles in the middle of the crisis. Maybe we'll say no now, and in a few months we're going to realize it was really a mistake and we shouldn't have this as a rule. But yeah, when we get there, we'll find out. And so we sent them this long email when we said we're going to have to kind of either fire ourselves or put everyone in a part-time contract because we don't have enough money, etc. And a few, like a month afterwards, they came back and they said, yeah, okay, actually, you're right. Do put this online and keep the 300K. So yeah, I don't think we ever had from any other kind of organization or person kind of anything to be that they were afraid of, you know? They were just like, wow, it's good that you do this. And yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't, you know?
You got to
But
be tough. So
Yeah,
you're a tough guy, Ricardo.
Tough team.
You
It
gotta-
was really
You got to
unanimous.
be tough. I mean, I think one of the things about transparency, you got to be tough. So,
but you must have thought, Ricardo, was this the right response, right? For a moment, or
Definitely. I mean, we were all in the most anxious times of our lives. Like we literally had no money in the bank. Like, well, we did have like the monthly kind of transfers that we get from members, but that was just 50% of the budget. So we were kind of thinking, even the month before this conversation, we were already within the team asking ourselves, who could be without a salary for a few months, who has like no savings and really needs a salary. And I mean, in Fumaça, we also have another thing that obviously this is not maybe the kind of the place to talk about deeply, but we also have a non-hierarchical newsroom without bosses, admins, directors. And so all of our decisions are made through consensus. And this decision of also saying no to 300K was also done through consensus. So, and it was like a 5-minute meeting. It was like an urgent meeting. Everyone went to Slack and we talked and like, what we're going to do. And 5 minutes later, we're like, yeah, we're going to take it down. It's going to be horrible. We're going to have to fire ourselves, reduce our salaries. But that's the only good way to do this, because if we had received the money and then explain people we're actually changing our policy and not put this one specific contract online, then we would be in a problem. Then people would start asking, what happened in that contract? Like,
yeah, and it's actually by this outcome, you're also paving the way for more transparency in other professions, right? Among the funders also. So I think that's you're kind of pioneering in that sense, I think. Julia, you with your agency, I can imagine you also sometimes turn down assignments that are not in line with your policy or your editorial view. How does that work?
Yes, we experienced some of the same things that Ricardo has said in different ways, but just to give an example, recently we lost the official advertising for asking a question in a press conference. So that really happened a few months ago, and it was just for asking a question, and that's okay. We know that our practice comes with some consequences, so we have to be ready to go further and just to find another way to like balance that loss. And for us, that is really important. That's why it's really important the different revenues that we have. So there are really different ways of approaching all of these situations that appear. But I have to agree with James and with Ricardo. You have to be tough, and it's also really challenging to do all of this when you're a woman. It's different if you are a man. That's really a reality, because people don't expect that maybe a woman could be like really confrontative, and my job is like as the leader of the project or of the media, I have to do all of this, and it's really difficult. But the same way Ricardo has said, we have a really solid group, and all of our decisions are consensus. So there is no doubt when we have to say no to something, because we are all on the same page. So it's really easy to like follow your instinct when you think something is not for our project. So that, I think that it's a really important thing for all independent projects, because if there's not a solid like base, it's really hard to develop a project that really works. In the end of the day, we all want to keep doing journalism. We all want to keep doing a committed journalism that can, I don't know, can in the most utopic way, like transform the world through our work. So we have to say no sometimes, and we have to decide where we can flexibilize like some things, but there are things that we don't like compromise. So I think that's really important to have all of that in clear, like in your head, but also in paper. And it's really important that all the team go to the same in the same direction, because it's the only way to grow. And I think what we all do, like as journalism, as independent journalism, is really important, because if we don't show what's going on, like for example here in the city, if we do not ask that question in that press conference, maybe some people wouldn't know what really is going on. And that came with a consequence for us, and we have to face it. We have to sit with the authorities and say, hey, that's not okay. We accept it, but that's not okay. And you have to admit you are censoring us, and that's the way it is. And it's okay, we can go further. We don't depend on that. That's really important, that we don't depend on that or in that other thing. I think that's like the key of our sustainability model.
Yeah, super interesting. And thanks for sharing. And I think also what you're explaining now ties into what Ricardo was saying about the non-hierarchical way you both organizations actually work. It does, I think, have a lot to do with transparency and the topic that we're talking about today. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, James.
Just that people admire courage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they admire the standing up to authority, because, well, in most cases, well, in that kind of a situation, the authority is trying to exert power over people, and people resent that. Again, this is why independent media have been successful attracting support through the fact that they will challenge authority, and this is not exactly transparency, but the fact that they will challenge authority, I think, is really key. There isn't enough power among people who are not in high positions in business or politics. And so hats off to you for standing up to the authorities.
Yeah, and you mentioned in the chat regarding the funding or the funders that they also worry that applicants who don't get grants will complain, or that the news of a grant will trigger an avalanche of new applications.
Yeah, that's, their desire for secrecy is because they don't want other people seeing what their business is, and frankly, a lot of times grants are made based on personal connections that don't necessarily align nicely with the stated goals of the foundation. They're helping people who are their buddies, and really there are more deserving people out there. They're afraid of that. They're afraid of that kind of criticism.
Yeah. They need to be more transparent then also in explaining their way of working, right?
Yes, yes.
So, and that also comes with extra work probably. Ljubica is asking, when a big funder withdraws, are you transparent that has happened? And how that step has been comprehended by the general audience? Are you afraid that can be seen as some sort of a pressure towards the funder to reconsider the decision? I guess the wording is very important. who wants to respond to this?
I
Maybe
can
Ricardo?
just, yeah, I can go ahead and just kind of briefly say, I think the only funder that we drew from us was Open Society, but I guess it was also, I'm sure there's people in the room who also face the same problem because they basically killed their journalism program. And they gave us, I think, 3 grants and then left. I don't remember if we did like a big announcement that Open Society is leaving us, because they also kind of left us with how do they call it, like a last grant, like so they gave us like a last 100K or 200, I don't remember, and then said like this is the last one. So it was also like a kind of good way to kind of leave with some money. But we did kind of recently, and especially after the Open Society left, and us being from Portugal, we are very much kind of in this fundraising limbo where we are not, at least seen from the funders, as poor enough to get money, but we also are not rich enough to have our own grants in the country. Like there's 0 grants for journalism in Portugal at all. So we've been more recently, since that moment, kind of written also in our newsletter, so to everyone who subscribes it, but also like publicly in other places, about how Open Society leaving, but also Illuminate leaving, and Civitas not giving more than like 1 grant in Portugal and just choosing 1 or 2 countries. For most of the foundations, Portugal being Western Europe, which is quite ironic. We've been talking about that quite a lot, but I don't think we have experience of like actually saying this funder is going away, kind of send them emails to come back. Like, no, I don't think I can talk a lot about that.
Thanks, Ricardo. Julia, anything you want to share in this regard?
We didn't experience anything like that because we haven't worked with founders in that way. We had like grants, but like separately. We don't have like periodically or some like that. But when we had some issues with other type of partners, we maybe don't share it with our community, but also because here, and I think in other places, there is a thing that maybe when someone like the government or an advertise like goes, there is like revenge thing with the content. Like maybe if the local government stop giving you money, you start talking like badly or poorly of the government. Well, we're not like that, so we are really criticism all the time. So maybe you cannot do that read, and we have a really different way of like separate like the content through or the revenues. So we didn't experience something like that. But I think that it's really cool if you can share it with your community, because that's a way of building like a trustworthy relationship. But I also want to say that maybe it's important that it's not all like roses and everything is cool. Like it's really hard to build a community. And for us, for example, that we make breaking news, there are a lot of people who really support us and really cherish all of our work and really values the way we share the information and the way we tell the stories. But there are lots of people that are really not happy with the way we make journalism, and they are always trying to find something else. They are always trying to say that we are here. There is like a big agree, like it's or either you are like official or either you are like the opposition. Like there's kirchnerista o opositor o del pro o libertario. That's the word we use here, and we're none of them. So all the times we receive like oh, you're saying that, oh, this is because they're giving you money. That's not really what is happening. So it's really cool that at the end of the day we are really sure of the way we do journalism. So if anyone likes to come here and make like questions, they have everything to know, and everything is in papers, and we are a legal organization, and we have all of that. So when earlier you were talking about auditions, the taxes and everything, we are really sure and we're really okay with all of that because we know we don't have anything to hide. So I think that's like the primer thing. You have to be really organized. You have to have all your legally things in order. You have to have all of that like in a really neat, tidy way, because that's a way of reassuring the I don't know, the future of your organization.
Yeah, so the transparency actually also comes from a point that you need to do it in order to survive in that sense. Yeah, understand. We're almost running towards the end. I don't know if anybody, I just see, oh yeah, a thank you popping up in the chat. If anybody wants to make use of this time to ask a last question, or if James, Ricardo, or Julia wants to add anything to what one of the other speakers has mentioned, please do.
I do wanted to answer one question that was in the chat. I think one of the first ones, because I don't know who asked, but I just copied it to my notes, and it says something like, I would be interested to hear from Ricardo about their fair wage approach. How does this tie into your radical transparency?
It was Rona, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Because I think it's an interesting question, because we don't kind of choose to give better wages than in other places because of a radical transparency. But I think the radical transparency is what allowed us to do that, because since all our decisions are made through consensus, also our budget, our annual budget, is also made through consensus. So it's a collective exercise of building the budget for next year. And as, I mean, most of you will know, like if you have X amount of money in your bank account, and if you keep the budget as it is today, you'll have some, I don't know, runaway, like some months in your bank. But if you, I don't know, raise salaries, hire a person, whatever, you'll have less months. And so there's always this kind of battle discussion between the most conservative members of the team and the most non-conservative members of the team regarding finances. I am on the latter. I'm the second one. And it's like, do we raise salaries? Do we hire someone? And that question almost always, almost every year is answered by, yes, we do raise salaries every year. Only 1 year we didn't raise salaries. And we always do that in a team retreat that usually lasts a week. This year is going to be next week, actually, on Friday we're going. And it's going to be a whole week where we leave the newsroom, leave Lisbon, go to a remote part, to a house that is lended to us by someone from the community. And we just stay there for a week, and we kind of evaluate the last year and then plan the year ahead. And then the last day of the team retreat is the budget. And since all of this is made through consensus, and since every single person of the team has full access to all our finances, knows exactly how much money we have in the bank, how much money we spend, what is our current budget, what is the exact month where we're going to kind of run out of money if everything goes according to the budget. I think it kind of then, allows us to have these conversations in a more honest way. And it's more like, if you do want to raise salaries or hire a person or move someone who's part-time currently to a full-time position, you know that you're gonna kind of reduce the amount of money you have in the bank. Instead of having money for a whole full year, maybe it's 10 months. And then the question is, are you okay with that or not? And for me, I'm usually in the position where I say, I feel like we should always go to as closer as possible to utopia. Like, I think we should prefigurate today the future we want tomorrow, and kind of, as David Graeber says, like, act as if we were free. Even if that means that we have less months in the bank, or that we're going to run out of money sooner, I prefer to kind of pay to people decently and then the project to collapse, than to kind of drag a project until eternity, but in a precarious condition. I just don't feel like that's what we should do. And then there's other people who are like, yeah, but I prefer to have a job for more months than to have a better pay, but for less months. And then after a few hours of discussion, we arrive at a number, and that's it. But it's the beautiful part of consensus is that we always get to a decision that nobody hates, you know? So yeah. And then because of that, and this we realized we had no idea about this, or I mean, we had kind of a guess, but it was never like confirmed. But I think a year ago or 2 years ago, because of a lot of people being fired from big mainstream media outlets, and a spreadsheet was put up by journalists, anonymous, who was basically, and the spreadsheet was shared among all journalists from every kind of newsrooms that would be around. So you could put what was your job at the newsroom, the name of the newsroom, and what was your salary. And then we realized that Fumaça was actually the newsroom that was paying best to just kind of normal, not in the hierarchies, obviously not the directors, etc., but like journalists across the country. So we were paying around 300 to 400 euros more per month than if you were in Público or Expresso or whatever, the biggest newspapers of the country. And so, yeah, we realized, oh, actually, we're paying a salary that is like decent for you to live in Lisbon, though not good, but just decent. Everyone else is just not. And so, unfortunately, journalists in the country need to decide at the end of the month if they pay their rent or eat, right? So it's a way more difficult than in Fumaça.
You probably get a lot of applicants based on stats like that, Ricardo. Yeah.
A lot.
Thanks so much. Yeah. James, do you have any final words for this gathering?
No, I think Ricardo and Julia have enlightened us quite a bit, and I wouldn't want to gild the lily.
I absolutely agree. Thanks so much to you, James, to Ricardo, and to Julia. I hope everybody in this webinar really enjoyed the conversation. We put up all the links also to Fumaça, to Qué Digital, to James's blog, also to the newsletter that we sent from Project Oasis monthly Sustainable Connections. And I just also shared a blog that I enjoyed reading that Ricardo wrote in December about their consensus model. And the great thing is that we can use Google Translate to go from Portuguese to English. So I think there's some insights in there too. Thanks everyone for your time on this Thursday afternoon. It's sunny here. I hope the sun shines literally and figuratively wherever you are. And we hope to see you in a next webinar here at Project Oasis and Sembra Media. Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.